Hey, what's up, guys? You're now listening to Devo with Uncle Theo. Today is day 133, and we're going to cover Chronicles chapter 6 and 7. So remember what we're doing here. Chronicles is basically recapping everything we just covered in First Kings, but it's going to emphasize more the vertical aspect than the horizontal aspect. So last time we saw that the book is emphasized. It has given us a abbreviated version from Adam to Noah, all the way through the patriarchs. And then we saw the house of David emphasized. And now we're going to move to the 12 tribes of Israel with an emphasis on Levi today. And so that's what we're going to pick up with in verse 6. Levi's priestly line is going to be emphasized. So in chapter 6, verse 1, it says, the sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Kohath were Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. The children of Amram were, and this is where these names start to make sense to us, were Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. And so we studied them extensively. But use this as a marker in your mind. If you want to have a long list of the priestly line all the way up to the exile, just remember to come to Chronicles chapter 6. And remember, who did God say that the priesthood would have perpetuity through? So when you're looking at Aaron's sons in verse 3, it says, and the sons of Aaron were Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. So remember, Nadab and Abihu are killed in Leviticus 10 for offering strange fire to the Lord. And we see the priestly line flow through Eleazar. And remember that son? It says it right here. Eleazar became the father of Phinehas, and Phinehas became the father of Abishua, and Abishua became the father of Bukai, and Bukai became the father of Uzzah. And you trace that line of Phinehas all throughout this book. And so notice you'll see some people who served as high priests not on this list. And remember, a lot of times we would say that, hey, this guy isn't from the line of Eleazar or Phinehas. He's usurped the throne and operating in that role and wasn't a genuine high priest. And you see that here, that a lot of those people don't make the list. And so remember that the Levitical priesthood was built around Levi's three sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And if you remember, they each handled different parts of the tabernacle. And just for a reminder, Gershon handled all of the curtains, Merari handled all of the poles, and Kohath handled all of the inner furnishings of the most holy place and the holy place. And you see those names listed out in verse 16 through 20. And we get an interesting note. In verse 31, it says, these are the men David put in charge of the music in the house of the Lord after the ark came to rest there. They ministered with music before the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, until Solomon built the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. They performed their duties according to the regulations laid down for them. Here are the men that served together with their sons. So what's interesting here is when the temple was a tabernacle, these three tribes handled these furnishings. But as the temple became more stable and permanent, you see the Levitical clan start to contribute in more. They start to contribute in theology, and they contribute in music. They're musicians. And Heman from the family of Kohath, Asaph from Gershon, and Ethan from Merari. And so use this as your anchor to legitimize the Levitical priesthood. And this is your hub to come check any genealogy, because remember our war from Genesis 3:15. This is the lineage and the seed of God and where he's going with the Levitical priesthood. And you can trace all the way from Levi here in Chronicles 6. And you get a repetition in verses 50 through 53. It's repeating verses 4 through 6, which most commentators say that this is legitimizing the line of Zadok, which is a priest from Solomon's time. And it shows who was legitimized during that time to make sacrifices. And the rest of chapter 6, verses 54 through 81, is basically the allotment that the Levites had, because remember, they had no territory. The Lord was to be their portion. and they had Levitical cities dispersed all throughout the land. Can anyone remember how many? We covered this in Joshua chapter 21. If you said 48, you guessed it right. We talked about the 48 Levitical cities and the 6 refuge cities. Remember when they could flee? They had committed accidental murder, manslaughter. And so if you can put in your mind, that's what's being covered here in the rest of chapter 6 from verses 54 through 81. That'll help your thinking as you're trying to work through all of those names and the areas that they were in. We close out with chapter 7. Chapter 7 is covering the rest of the tribes: Issachar, Benjamin, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, and it closes with Asher. In chapters 1 through 5, your genealogy for Issachar is what we've already covered in Genesis 46 and in Numbers. Remember, you have 2 censuses in Numbers, the first generation and the second generation. The first census was taken in Numbers chapter 1, and the second census was taken in Numbers chapter 26. And so all of those clans are listed again here. And a lot of times, if you ever followed a biblical character and wondered, hey, what tribe is this guy of? Like you may say in your mind, what tribe is Moses of? What tribe is Aaron of? What tribe is Caleb of? Caleb is of the tribe of Judah. Moses is of the tribe of Levi. A lot of these people are listed in Chronicles, and this is where you can go check your work to see of which tribe did a lot of the characters that we follow flow from. For instance, what tribe was Saul from? He was from Benjamin. If you look under Benjamin, you'll see Saul's name. In fact, it won't be teased out in chapter 7 under the section here with Benjamin. We'll see that tomorrow in chapter 8. And you got to remember, all the tribes didn't flow from just Leah and Rachel. Remember, they started to include their maidservants and their concubines into the mix. And you remember them? Their names were Bilhah and Zilpah. And one of those sons was Naphtali. Those were the children of Bilhah from Genesis 30, and his descendants are listed there. And the last two, you remember that Joseph had a double portion, and so his children Manasseh and Ephraim are listed next. And we talked about this under Manasseh. They had a serious care and concern of the promised land, especially Zelophehad's daughters, and God honored them. And Zelophehad's name is in verse 15. It says, another descendant was named Zelophehad, who only had daughters. And so this is just reminding us of everything we've covered. This is a good time here. It's like a family reunion. We get a family tree, a genealogy. We get to reflect on a lot that we've studied, and it actually be a little more meaningful to us. And I encourage you, as you're reading through these genealogies, highlight the names you know. And as you go through each year, try to learn some new names and some information about them. And that's why I'm not trying to go too deep with a lot of names that we haven't studied before, because a lot of them you really don't have to learn because it's not much information given on them. So it would just literally be memorizing that name. And so you want to try to memorize the names where the Bible gives more information on. Then on your next cycle, memorize the names where the Bible gives a little less information on so you can know about them. And your last, and you really don't even have to get to this, but memorizing the names that are just here for record. Those won't help your faith any, but what it will do is just solidify your history and ability to track that lineage better. And that'll be more for the history buffs, people who are into that. But for the most part, you just want to memorize the names on this first run through that I've given and the people I've highlighted. If you want to go on a more advanced track, you may want to start to memorize more names where less information is given. So this genealogy ends with Asher, and that closes out our chapter. And so remember, my encouragement to you is always, if you hated genealogies of you or you skipped over them, you always said that they sucked, that you didn't like them, that they were boring, you didn't get anything out of them. I feel you, but understand why they are there. If you could tie your thinking to Genesis 3:15 and know that there's enmity out there between God and Satan, And God is doing you a service to help you track his seed and where he's going, because Satan is warring against this. And if you didn't have this information, Satan could utterly confuse this and you wouldn't even know Christ when you saw him. The first proof that Jesus is the Messiah is that he flows through the proper lineage. So before you even looked at the signs and wonders, before you even listened to the authority of his word, you had to start with a genealogy. That's why Matthew starts with a genealogy. He's proving to you that Jesus is the true Messiah because of birthright. And that is very important. And all the other things can be built upon that. And all of the other theology, just like John the Baptist anointing him, coming in the spirit of Elijah, taking a Nazirite vow. Now we're getting into theology, and you can build your theology knowing that this is the promised one from Genesis 3:15. And so don't beat up the chronicler for being so redundant. Just rejoice that your God cares about you so much that he's willing to leave you a record. And you don't have to memorize this record. Just know how to get to it. And just know that your official high priests are in chapter 7, that your family of David is here. We covered yesterday that your other 12 tribes are here. We're finishing those today. We'll even look at people not in the line of Judah. We'll see Saul tomorrow. And so you may not go too in depth with this information. It's actually going to get pretty deep later with theology. But right now, theologies are the hard parts that we have to get through together. So I hope I'm not losing you. Stick with me and let's keep rocking to the end. You guys take care. Have a good day.